comes Sabali.
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Caitlin Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't post a cryptic tweet. She didn't fire back in an interview. In fact, she said absolutely nothing. And somehow, that silence became louder than anything anyone else said that weekend. Because sometimes in sports, it's not the clapback that changes the story. It's the composure. And for Kelsey Plum, that silence may have been the moment everything shifted. What was supposed to be a celebratory All-Star Weekend turned into one of the most dissected controversies the league has seen in years. The spotlight wasn't meant to be on Caitlin Clark at all. She wasn't scheduled to dominate headlines. She wasn't even supposed to be central to the narrative. The stage belonged to the All-Stars who suited up, the players who took the court, the ones competing under the bright lights. That was the plan. But plans have a way of unraveling when emotions, egos, and unresolved tensions collide. Clark, the rookie phenom for the Indiana Fever and the most talked-about player in the WNBA, has carried unprecedented attention into the league. Record-breaking viewership, sold-out arenas, soaring merchandise sales, national conversations. Whether people celebrate it or resent it, her impact is undeniable. And even when she's not on the floor, her presence lingers. During the post-game press conference, what should have been a moment about unity became something else entirely. The All-Star players had worn black shirts during the game bearing a bold message, "Pay us what you owe us." It was a coordinated act meant to spotlight ongoing conversations about compensation and respect for the athletes who've built the league over decades. It was intended to symbolize solidarity, players from rival teams standing together for a shared cause. Then Kelsey Plum spoke. Not a tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that. 5 seconds. A single sentence. A casual delivery. And just like that, the narrative fractured. The room shifted. Cameras caught the subtle but unmistakable reaction from Sabrina Ionescu sitting beside her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But her expression told a story, the kind of look that suggests awareness, maybe even regret, as if she recognized instantly that something delicate had just been broken. Because here's what many viewers didn't fully grasp in the moment. The meeting where players organized the shirt protest reportedly took place the same morning as the All-Star game. It wasn't spontaneous. It was structured, intentional, planned. And according to accounts circulating afterward, members of Team Clark, including players from the Indiana Fever, were not part of that initial discussion. That detail changed everything. When a league-wide statement is crafted and one specific group isn't included in the planning process, whether intentional or not, it creates perception. And perception in professional sports spreads faster than fact-checking. To fans already sensitive to any hint of division within the league, Plum's comment didn't sound like harmless teasing. It sounded like confirmation of a deeper tension. There has long been a quiet undercurrent inside the WNBA, the balance between veterans who have fought tirelessly for recognition and the arrival of a rookie whose stardom accelerated the spotlight almost overnight. That doesn't erase the years of work done by established players. It doesn't diminish their struggle, but it does change the landscape. Rapid change often brings discomfort, especially when it feels uneven. Plum's phrasing, "not to tattletale," wasn't accidental. That's not filler language. It's a signal. It's what people say when they know the information they're about to share might ignite something.
Back Bentley. Here's Clark, a good look.
It softens the delivery while acknowledging the impact. And in that press room, the impact was immediate. Social media erupted within hours. Some defended Plum, arguing she was highlighting accountability. Others criticized the comment as unnecessary and divisive. Debates flared about inclusion, communication, leadership, and whether Clark, who wasn't even central to the event, had been subtly positioned as an outsider. Through it all, Caitlin Clark remained silent. No reactionary posts.
No pointed interviews. No visible frustration.
And that restraint forced the focus back onto the league itself. Because without a public rebuttal, there was nothing to escalate the situation further. The conversation had to stand on its own merit. What made the situation more layered was Clark's unique position. As the face of the Indiana Fever and arguably the league's most marketable star at the moment, her presence carries weight. TV ratings spike when she plays.
Arenas fill.
Corporate sponsors pay attention. That level of influence inevitably shifts dynamics, not because it's requested, but because attention follows impact. So, when her team appeared disconnected from a unified player statement, fans began asking difficult questions. Was it miscommunication? Timing? Or something more symbolic? It's important to note that public narratives often grow larger than the initial moment. A single comment can morph into a referendum on league culture. And while speculation spreads quickly, the internal realities are often far more nuanced than internet discourse suggests. Still, the imagery mattered. A league promoting unity. A public comment singling out a specific team. A rookie superstar at the center of conversations she didn't initiate. And a visible reaction from Ionescu that hinted the moment might not have unfolded as intended. In professional sports, perception becomes legacy. And that All-Star Weekend may be remembered less for the final score and more for the press conference soundbite that followed. Clark's silence didn't weaken her position. If anything, it amplified it. In a media environment fueled by instant reactions, choosing composure can be a strategic power move. By refusing to escalate, she allowed the situation to reflect back on those who spoke. The broader conversation about player compensation and league growth remains valid and necessary. Veterans deserve respect for the foundation they built. Rising stars deserve acknowledgement for expanding the platform. Ideally, those truths coexist. But moments like this reveal how fragile that balance can be. What unfolded wasn't just about a t-shirt. It wasn't just about a meeting invite. It was about symbolism. Who feels included, who feels overlooked, and how quickly unity can fracture under public scrutiny. And perhaps the most striking part of the entire situation is this. The player who said the least shaped the narrative the most. Caitlin Clark didn't need a microphone that weekend. The reaction, the footage, and the ripple effect of a single sentence did the talking for her. For fans watching closely, the takeaway wasn't about rivalry or drama. It was about leadership under pressure. It was about understanding that in today's sports landscape, influence doesn't always require volume. As the season continues and the Indiana Fever push forward, this moment may fade from headlines. Or it may linger as a case study in how quickly narratives form inside a growing league navigating new levels of attention. Either way, one thing is certain. What was meant to be a unified message became a defining conversation. And the silence that followed spoke louder than anyone expected.
Perfect. Assist 16.
By the time that press conference wrapped up, the shift had already happened. What should have been a defining moment about player unity and pay equity had quietly slipped into the background. The black shirts. The bold message. The coordinated statement meant to spark serious conversation about compensation in the WNBA. All of it was suddenly overshadowed. The cameras were no longer focused on solidarity. They were locked onto a single sentence that redirected the entire weekend. And at home, away from the noise, was Caitlin Clark. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't reacted. She hadn't defended herself. But she was watching. There's a difference in professional sports between accountability and exposure, between calling someone out and casually placing them in the line of fire. One requires intention and courage. The other can look like carelessness, or worse, calculation disguised as humor. When Kelsey Plum made her, not to tattletale, remark about Team Clark's absence from the earlier meeting, she may have intended it as a light joke. She later suggested she was just trying to lighten the mood. But humor depends on the room, and the room didn't respond. It went quiet. That silence said more than laughter ever could. Within minutes, the clip began circulating online. Within hours, it was everywhere: sports pages, trending sections, commentary accounts, and even general entertainment platforms. People who hadn't watched a single All-Star possession were now watching that press conference clip on repeat. The narrative had flipped completely. Instead of discussing pay equity, fans were debating fairness, timing, and whether a player sitting at home with an injury should have been publicly singled out. And that's the detail that fueled the backlash. Clark wasn't there. She wasn't on the court. She wasn't even in the building. She couldn't respond in real time. She couldn't clarify. She couldn't offer context. The moment unfolded without her voice present, and for many fans, that changed how it felt. What might have been interpreted as playful commentary under different circumstances now felt like a blindside. Social media didn't hesitate. Supporters of the pay equity message found themselves conflicted. Some defended Plum. Others questioned the necessity of bringing Clark's name into the conversation at all. The phrase "wrong move, wrong time, wrong target" began appearing across comment sections. And what intensified the reaction was perception. Plum was healthy, playing on the All-Star stage, sharing space with the league's elite, while Clark was sidelined with an injury. Optically, it didn't look balanced. One clip in particular amplified the discussion: the visible reaction from Sabrina Ionescu seated beside Plum. She didn't interrupt.
She didn't correct.
But her expression, brief, subtle, unmistakable, became one of the most replayed moments from that conference. Viewers interpreted it as recognition that something delicate had just been disrupted. Whether that interpretation was fair or exaggerated, it became part of the story. And context matters. Plum is not new to this league. She understands media cycles. She understands how quickly a soundbite can evolve into a headline. The phrasing, not to tattletale, wasn't random filler. It's the kind of preface people use when they know what they're about to say could land sharply. It softens the delivery while acknowledging the sting. That's why the reaction felt less accidental and more intentional to some observers. The timing only heightened everything. The WNBA has been experiencing tangible momentum, expanded television exposure, rising attendance, growing sponsorship interest. And much of that surge has coincided with Clark's arrival. Whether that reality creates admiration, pressure, or quiet tension behind the scenes, it's part of the current landscape. So when a comment created the appearance of internal division during a weekend meant to celebrate growth, it felt counterproductive to many fans. The league attempted to move forward. Plum attempted to clarify. But once online discourse crystallizes, it rarely rewinds. Within 24 hours, her name was trending nationally, and not in the celebratory way athletes hope for. The shirts and their message were barely part of the conversation anymore. Instead, debates centered on fairness, optics, and locker room dynamics. What perhaps surprised many was the breadth of the reaction.
Clark, a little bit of daylight.
It wasn't limited to Clark's core supporters. Journalists, analysts, former players, and neutral viewers weighed in. The recurring theme? Optics. The image of using a high-profile stage to reference someone absent from it didn't sit well with a broad segment of the audience. And through all of this, Clark remained silent. No reactive statement. No emotional post. No interview addressing the moment. Until she chose her moment carefully. Days later, Plum shared a standard All-Star Weekend photo on Instagram. It looked like any other celebratory post: smiles, highlights, branded gear. But in that image was a subtle detail: Clark in visible Nike apparel. And here's where context matters again. Plum has a long-standing endorsement deal with Under Armour. Clark, on the other hand, is aligned with Nike. Clark's response? 6 words in the comments. Thank you for the Nike ad.
No anger. No defensiveness.
No mention of the press conference. Just precision. The internet erupted again, but this time, the tone was different. The comment was interpreted as witty, controlled, even strategic. It redirected attention without directly confronting the previous remark. It reframed the dynamic without escalating it. Most importantly, it carried zero visible desperation. That's why it landed. Clark didn't argue the narrative. She didn't attempt to justify her team's absence from the meeting. She didn't revisit the tattletale comment. She simply shifted the spotlight with a calm, pointed observation that required no follow-up. In social dynamics, that kind of response communicates confidence. It suggests a player secure enough in her position that she doesn't need to defend it loudly. Even critics acknowledged the sharpness of the move. Because underneath the humor was control. Where Plum's comment had ignited weeks of debate, Clark's 6 words closed the loop in seconds. It wasn't about brand rivalry alone. It was about timing and tone. She waited. she observed. And when she finally spoke, it was measured. In professional sports, reactions often define perception as much as performance. One athlete spoke quickly in a press conference environment. Another responded later, on her own terms. One moment triggered division. The other generated admiration for composure. The broader conversation about pay equity remains important. The growth of the WNBA remains significant. Internal dynamics within any league undergoing rapid change are complex and layered. But this episode revealed something deeper about modern sports culture. Power isn't always expressed through volume. Sometimes it's expressed through restraint. Clark's silence wasn't absence. It was patience. And when she chose to engage, she did so in a way that shifted the narrative without reigniting conflict. No press tour. No dramatic statement. Just 6 words that reminded everyone she understood exactly where she stood. In the end, the All-Star Weekend will likely be remembered less for the scoreboard and more for the lessons in optics, timing, and control. A single sentence created a storm. 6 words calmed it, or at least redirected it. And in a league navigating unprecedented attention and evolving identity, moments like these don't just trend. They shape perception. One player spoke quickly. The other waited. And in today's sports landscape, that difference can define everything.
Indiana's got to stop letting the ball get into the paint. They've got to keep it out.
Caitlin Clark didn't need that moment. She didn't need to dominate a press conference. She didn't need to win a verbal exchange. In fact, she didn't need to participate in the drama at all. By staying out of it, she was already ahead. And when she finally chose to respond, it wasn't with a speech, not with an interview, not with a defensive explanation, just a single, calculated line that reminded everyone exactly where she stood. That kind of restraint reflects a different level of influence. It's not the power of volume. It's the power of positioning. Because while debates swirled online and headlines dissected every expression from All-Star Weekend, the numbers were doing their own talking. And numbers don't argue. They don't pick sides. They simply reflect reality. When it was officially announced that Caitlin Clark would not participate in the All-Star game due to a groin injury, the secondary ticket market reacted almost instantly. Reports showed ticket prices dropping dramatically, in some listings nearly 50%. Not a minor dip, not a routine fluctuation. A sharp, immediate correction tied directly to one player's absence. You can debate team dynamics. You can emphasize collective effort. You can talk about basketball being bigger than any individual, and in principle, that's true. But markets respond to demand, and demand responds to interest. In that moment, the interest was measurable. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout her rookie season with the Indiana Fever, Clark's presence consistently correlated with record-breaking attendance figures, surging television ratings, elevated streaming numbers, and unprecedented merchandise sales. Jersey sales spiked. Road arenas reported sellouts when Indiana came to town. Broadcast partners highlighted her games in prime slots. These metrics are the currency of modern sports leagues. They influence sponsorships, media rights negotiations, and long-term revenue growth. That's not opinion. That's economics. Which is why the All-Star Weekend controversy felt larger than a simple comment. Because layered beneath it was an uncomfortable contradiction that many fans began to articulate. The black shirts worn during the game carried a powerful message: pay us what you owe us. It was a statement about compensation, about recognition, about the long-standing fight for financial equity within the WNBA. Those conversations are legitimate. Structural pay disparities in professional sports are real and complex. They deserve thoughtful discussion. But timing and optics matter. When the same weekend that spotlighted that message also included a public comment singling out the league's most commercially impactful player, a player who wasn't even present due to injury, the narrative shifted. Fair or unfair, people began asking a blunt question: who is driving the revenue growth being referenced? That's where tension emerged. It's possible to support pay equity while also acknowledging that star power influences revenue streams. It's possible to honor veteran contributions while recognizing that certain players accelerate visibility at unprecedented speed. These ideas are not mutually exclusive. Yet the All-Star moment made them collide in a way that felt unresolved. Former champions and retired NBA figures weighed in, adding another layer to the discourse. When respected voices who have navigated high-stakes professional environments begin describing a situation as avoidable or embarrassing, it draws attention beyond the usual fan base. Their argument was straightforward. When a player is demonstrably expanding your league's audience, public friction is risky. Growth phases require cohesion, or at least the appearance of it. Meanwhile, Clark herself remained focused on recovery. Her head coach, Stephanie White, addressed the situation with measured professionalism. White emphasized Clark's rehabilitation progress and clarified that the immediate priority was health, not headlines. The message was clear: basketball operations would not be distracted by social media storms. That's organizational leadership, maintaining focus on performance and player welfare rather than public disputes. In contrast, the original purpose of the All-Star shirts faded from mainstream coverage.
The ball in transition. Oh, that's not gonna waste.
The pay equity discussion that should have sparked nuanced conversation was overshadowed by a soundbite debate. A single, not-to-tattletale comment from Kelsey Plum became the defining takeaway of the weekend. Instead of dialogue about structural reform, fans were analyzing facial reactions and Instagram replies. That shift illustrates a broader truth about media cycles. Delivery can eclipse substance. When the messenger becomes the focal point, the message often suffers. Stepping back from personalities, what this episode truly exposed was friction created by rapid transformation. For years, WNBA veterans have worked tirelessly for recognition, pushing for better contracts, improved travel conditions, greater broadcast exposure. Progress came incrementally. Then, almost overnight, a rookie entered the league and altered public engagement levels dramatically. That kind of acceleration is exhilarating for some and destabilizing for others. Human nature responds to change in complex ways. Clark's rise does not negate the labor of those who came before her, nor does veteran advocacy diminish her impact. Both realities can coexist. But coexistence requires candid conversation, and candid conversation is difficult in the glare of viral clips. Plum's remark, whether intended as humor or pointed commentary, inadvertently illuminated that underlying tension. It wasn't solely about attendance at a meeting. It symbolized deeper questions about inclusion, recognition, and ownership of the league's narrative. Clark's response, however, reframed the dynamic entirely. Her 6-word Instagram comment, thanking Plum for the unintended Nike ad, functioned as subtle leverage. By referencing her affiliation with Nike while Plum maintains a sponsorship relationship with Under Armour, Clark shifted attention from conflict to irony. It was controlled, it was brief, and it carried no visible emotional charge. That absence of desperation is why it resonated. In competitive environments, reactions often reveal more than actions. Plum addressed the situation immediately and publicly. Clark waited. She allowed the discourse to mature. And when she engaged, she did so in a way that neither escalated hostility nor apologized for her influence. Meanwhile, her broader trajectory continued upward. Endorsement deals expanded. National advertisements aired. Merchandise demand sustained momentum. The business side of her brand kept advancing independent of social media debates. While others debated the weekend's optics, she was preparing for the next stretch of games. There's a broader lesson here that extends beyond basketball. Public criticism invites two options: engage directly and risk amplifying it, or respond strategically and limit its lifespan. Clark chose the latter. 6 words, delivered calmly, reclaimed narrative space without reopening conflict. At the conclusion of it all, several truths remain clear. The WNBA is in a transformative phase. Conversations about compensation and structural equity are valid and necessary. Star-driven growth is a measurable reality. Managing both requires careful communication and internal alignment. Clark did not need to dominate a press conference to demonstrate influence. The metrics already indicated her impact. The market response already reflected her draw. The ratings, attendance figures, and sponsorship attention provided empirical context. And when she finally did speak, brevity proved sufficient. The footage exists. The reactions are archived. The discourse has largely moved on to the next storyline. But the All-Star Weekend will likely endure as a case study in optics, timing, and the balance between advocacy and unity. Caitlin Clark did not have to say much. That, in itself, was the statement.